Just over a month ago, my good friend Chris Fitzpatrick hosted a webinar called Running a Tight Ship: Mentorship, Allyship, and Leadership. I was also joined on this panel discussion by my friend Natalie and Jessica. And during this panel discussion, we discussed the intersections of how mentorship with a valued and trusted ally helps elevate your leadership. This is a great discussion. I thought a lot of great insights were shared. And so I wanted to share this audio of this webinar with the Positive Philter listeners. Thank you so much and take care. Welcome to Positive Philter with your host, Philip Wilkerson, a podcast that focuses on friends, family, health, and career with a little self-help along the way. Please join me in this journey for self-improvement, and I hope what I have to share will make you a better person, thus making the world a better place. I hope you enjoy the show. I hope you enjoy the show.
All right, everybody, welcome. It is Thursday, September 28th, and we are here for a fireside chat on running a tight ship, mentorship, leadership, and allyship. My name is Chris Fitzpatrick. I'm the Senior Manager of Talent Development at Crestron Electronics and also a professional speaker and YouTube content creator. And I want to introduce three world-class panelists here that are going to take us through some terrific information over the course of the next 60 to 90 minutes. We have an hour of real formal discussion where we're going to be having a chat about these topics, and then we're going to have some time for Q&A after the fact. We intend to be done by about 7:30 because I know if you're anything like me, you want to make sure that you have enough time to set yourself up to watch the Green Bay Packer game tonight, and that is what I will be doing when we are done. So I am going to be sending it around to our panelists to introduce themselves, to unmute and introduce themselves. I'm going to start with Narali, and then I'm going to go down to Jessica and then to Philip.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining. My name's pronounced Natalie. I am currently the Director of Cooperative Education at Wentworth Institute of Technology in Boston, Massachusetts. Prior to my time here, I was at Boston University, where I reconnected with Chris, which is awesome. We go way back to my time at Stevens Institute of Technology in Hoboken, New Jersey. You can catch up on a theme that I work in the career education space. I'm passionate about career education, preparing students, alums, etc., for the world of work or whatever that means for you after college. And the theme of today, mentorship, allyship, and leadership, we're going to talk a bunch about, so I won't dive in, but those are all three areas that really resonated with me and have really helped me get to where I'm at today. Thanks again for joining, and I'll share my LinkedIn in the chat in a moment.
Great. Thanks, Natalie. Appreciate that. Jessica, why don't you take the floor?
Sure. Jessica Martini, she, her are my pronouns. I am a single mom. I'm a female financial advisor, which is very rare to find. And when it comes to things like allyship and mentorship, when you are a rare find in a field like finance, that's super important to have those. So I'm so excited to be talking about this today, you guys.
Awesome. Jessica, thanks for joining us. Jessica and I met relatively recently on a similar webinar on employee resource groups for leaders of ERGs and organizations. So that's the other thing about this particular group of panelists. Everyone is very passionate about topics surrounding diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, and I have a feeling, especially when we talk about allyship, a lot of that's going to come up. So thank you so much. And my tag team partner, you've seen him work with me before if you've caught any of our prior work, but Philip, go ahead, my man.
Yes, my name is Philip Wilkerson. I work at George Mason Career Services as an employer engagement consultant. I would say in this space of supporting Black and Brown students, I think that's where I align with mentorship. I'm also the faculty advisor of the Iota Alpha chapter of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. 06 to the good bros. I see some of them in here. I'm also the faculty advisor to the George Mason chapter, the NAACP. Shout out to one of my mentees in here from that space. I'm also a member of Eastern ACE. Shout out to Natalie from that space. I'm just in a lot of different spaces. And in regards to creating equitable spaces for diverse employees. I'm also the lead of the Black Male Faculty and Staff Employer Resource Group at George Mason. So we can talk about how if you're looking for creating, sometimes there's not a space, you have to create a space. So we'll get into that too as well. But thank you so much for this conversation. Looking forward to it.
Awesome. I love that. That's going to be the first hashtag I'm going to put into the chat here for everybody. So if you're following along and you want to shout any of the things that you hear out on social media, whether it's on Instagram or on LinkedIn, I think there's going to be some great thought here. We have 3 thought leaders here on the panel. So create a space. I love the sound. I love the idea of that. So thank you very much, Phil. So as our panelists talked about, we are discussing 3 ships today. There's a lot of ships out there, but I think these 3 are particularly important. So we have mentorship, allyship, and leadership. And they do not exist independent of one another. As a matter of fact, we see a lot of coalescence. We see a lot of instances in which these 3 topics really do work together symbiotically. So what I want to ask our panelists, and anybody can go in any order. We don't have a predetermined order here. This is going to be a little bit more of a casual chat, but how have each of you been really been impacted by one or many of the topics we're talking about here today? How have you been impacted personally or professionally by mentorship, by leadership, or by allyship? And anybody can jump in. Go ahead, Phil.
Yeah. So I think I like to always talk about paying it forward and paving the way for other people. I realize that in our lives, that usually we think we're unique in our DNA, but if you really think about it, a lot of things that we want to do have been done before. I realized very early on the impact of people that, just organically I wanted to be like them. And I joke, one of my earliest instances of just unintentional mentorship, I was in an all-Black male class in high school in the 10th grade. His name was Mark Holbrook, and he had us all in his class, just a blessing, where I went Mount Vernon High School, and we all stayed in touch. All my friends, the godfather of my children in that class, and I stayed in touch with him. And I saw Mark Holbrook at his 50th birthday, and he was like, when I started that class, I wanted to inspire you young Black men to go out there in the world. But like 90% of us became educators. And he's like, I didn't want y'all to be broke educators like me, But we were like, Holbrook, like, just because of that class, we just kind of gravitated to education. And so I realized early on that when you want to do things, you look for models. You look for people that paved the way and for me as a Black male, I look particularly for Black men that have been in spaces or been in positions ahead of me that I want to be in. And now in the blink of the eye, almost turning 40, 38 years old, I realize that now maybe some people view me as that, which I don't understand, right? They're like, Phil, you're my mentor. I was like, I didn't even know that was what a thing. Like, I didn't know that I just wanted to help you, And so that's kind of just my overall intersection of that, right? Looking for people that you aspire to be like, connecting with those people that you aspire to be like, and then just kind of going through the things that they do in their lives. And then someday you wake up and then you're doing that for someone else, whether you intentionally do it or not. So that's kind of my mentorship spiel.
And I love that story about how those relationships have carried with you for so long and through so much. I think that's one of the remarkable things is we see that it's easy for folks to grow apart, but you've held on to those relationships in such a deep and authentic way. And I got to applaud you for that. I love that story when you tell it on your podcast, and I think it's great here too. So Natalie, Jessica, how about either of you who'd like to jump in next about how mentorship, allyship, and or leadership have impacted you?
Yeah, sure. I'll take it from here. So for me, very similarly to Philip, I always wanted to be the person that people were for me in college. For example, I remember they very vividly starting there. It happened prior, but kind of naming it really. It started then. I think there was an awareness around this, particularly in how involved I was around campus and being that person for someone and really understanding this is where I think the intersection definitely comes into play as it relates to mentorship and allyship. So really seeking to understand beyond just you are my boss as an orientation leader. That, I was going to my boss's office for much more than just I'm here for my job. And so really seeking to understand like the whole person and being able to tap on them for not just ideas or industry insight, but more than that. So I think it really started for me then. And now that's how I kind of got into my work. I didn't wake up one day and say I wanted to be a higher education professional. And I don't think a lot of us in education did, as Phil mentioned, but it's kind of paving the way for others as well. And then with leadership tied into that too, I think I've identified folks who have served me well, but also learning from folks that weren't the best leadership or didn't quite necessarily even have leadership in place in certain positions or organizations. You learn just as much from those experiences than the really great, valuable experiences. So you really try to figure out what you want to do and who you want to include in that circle that really is a meaningful relationship to carry forward.
So many great nuggets there, Natalie. And I use the hashtag for you, be the person. We all need people in our lives. We all need, whether it's supporters, advocates, coaches, the idea of be that person that you would like for yourself. That's a very powerful message. That's great. Jessica, I want to toss it over to you and invite you to share some thoughts as well.
Yeah, I think allyship is something that comes up a lot in conversation within our firm and just in our society right now, right? We're going through a time in our world when people are becoming more aware of the differences that we all have and trying to celebrate those. And so I used to come with the perspective of, I feel like I'm not being heard. I'm the only woman at the table. How come you're not listening? And I shout louder and louder and louder. And I realize that it's partially on me to communicate in a way that makes it welcoming for other people to hear what I have to say, rather than just going in angrily saying, I'm different and I want you to hear that. And so that's been a mindset shift for me to say, okay, these are ways that you can support me. These are things that I can share with you that will help educate you. Please, if I'm in a women's affinity group, maybe we should invite some male allies to come and hear what we have to say, rather than just asking them to financially support us. Could you sit there with us and hear us and open that conversation? So that's been a really important pivot in my own mindset.
Awesome. And going back to that concept of be that person, especially since I've gotten to know you over the last, I think it's only been about a month or two, the content that you post about being an ally and being somebody who's there for women in finance and folks from historically marginalized backgrounds, LGBTQIA plus community, you're being that person.
Yeah. I think sometimes though, when we start on this mission, I think all of us, right, if we're really trying to fight for change, it feels like a fight. And then we have to remind ourselves, we've got to calmly have these conversations. That's how we'll get allyship.
Love it. Outstanding. So I want to get to know the audience a little bit today as well, because one of the things I noticed as registration was coming in is we have a very diverse group in terms of background. Definitely a lot of students here. And a lot of students are going to be watching this recording on YouTube as well, but also a lot of industry professionals that I've gotten to know over the years. So we're going to launch our first poll here. There's 2 questions on it, and we want to know a little bit about you. And the first question asks, which of the following statements best describes you? I don't have a mentor, and I don't know if I want one. Number 2 is I don't have a mentor, I want one, but I don't know how to get one. And if you hover your mouse over that, if you can't see the full question, it'll pop up. Number 3, I don't have a mentor, but I plan to get one. So you're on that track. I have a mentor, but I do not mentor anyone. I mentor someone, but I do not have a mentor. Or I am a mentor and have a mentor. We covered a lot of ground here. There's a lot of options. I know what you're thinking right now. Fitzpatrick, why so many options on the poll? Poll question should be short and sweet and 2 or 3 options, but this covers a lot of ground. And then the second question asks if you have either mentored or been mentored by someone of a different race, gender, etc., somebody different from you. We're going to talk about that topic in just a moment. So poll's been open for a moment. Looks like there's still 5 people out there that if you want to answer, you certainly can. And we'd love to have you send in your answer as well. And we'll just give it about another 10 seconds, and then we're going to end the poll and we'll display our answers. And I can tell you, as the person who's cheating and seeing the answers as they're coming in, this is fascinating. All right, let's end the poll and share the results. All right, you all see that? So across the board, which of the following best describes you? I was expecting to get a large number in one bucket. We are all over the map here. We have two folks who've said, I don't have a mentor, I don't know if I want one. The plurality of it is, I don't have a mentor, I want one, but I don't know how to find one. And then we have folks on the opposite end who are saying, I have a mentor and I am a mentor. So again, that underscores the fact that we have a lot of folks here who are experienced professionals who have been down the mentorship path, and folks who are probably starting out on that path. And then down below, this is encouraging, is that almost 3/4 of our respondents either have mentored or been mentored by somebody different than themselves. I think we'd asked this poll question 5 years ago or 10 years ago, it might not be quite here at this point. So Phil, you got your hand up. You want to react to this? Please do. Go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about the value. I want to go right into that one about the different identities. One of my greatest mentors, I've realized, not greatest, but there's benefits to both. As a Black male, I've found tremendous benefit to having a mentor that looks like me, a Black male, or shared experience. But also on the inverse, I talked about it, I wrote this about with my actual mentor, my NACE mentor, Samara Reynolds. There's tremendous benefit to having a mentor of very different identities to see their life perspective. And so I think the unifying thing right there is that you need to, when you have someone of a different identity, really look at the values. I think the things that really aligned with me and Samara of our different identities and having that allyship was that regardless of her salient identities on the surface as a white female, is that her values were very aligned. Her commitment to social justice, her thoughts on treating everyone with equity makes sense. So I would get right back to it right there, but I think that's what really stood out for me about different identities.
That's great. Yeah, outstanding. And I love the idea of the value alignment, right? Because alignment of values does not have to, that does not have to stay within one particular group. Value alignment can be universal in many cases. So go ahead, Jessica. What would you like to respond to on the poll? And if you all need me to reshare the results, just let me know.
Yeah, there have been studies recently that have shown that it's challenging for women to find female mentors because there are so few women in leadership that often as women work their way up, at least in the corporate world, that I hate to use the word assimilate, but they take on some of the mindset of their peers once they've moved up, and that there's this scarcity of positions for women in leadership. So there's more competition. So women are finding it difficult to get mentorship because there's this idea that, well, if you move up, then that's one less spot for me because there's only so many seats for ladies at the table. And so I think really it comes down to seeking it, saying those words out loud. Hey, can you be my mentor? Can I ask you for some guidance and some help to create that collaboration and kinship, within your own community?
And if you're concerned, and this is organizational advice out there, if you're concerned about having enough seats for all the different folks at the table, the different leaders at the table, real simple, build a bigger table. So, Natalie, any surprises on that poll for you? Anything that jumped off the page at you?
Yeah, I think I want to circle back to that. I would like a mentor, but I'm not sure how to find one. Kind of piggybacking off of this conversation as well.
27%.
Yeah, big chunk. We talk about this a lot within higher education and access, especially for different folk trying to find opportunities or learn about different career pathways and industry trends and all of that. And Sometimes there's a myth around like it needs to be an organized mentor-mentee relationship. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that. I myself have been a part of organized mentor-mentee relationships. Eastern ACE and NACE that Phil mentioned as well have those platforms and programs where, you know, for some folk, that is the way to go. You plug in your information, what you're hoping to get out of the relationship, you know, what your interest areas are, things like that. And there are some of those that do exist, whether it be through associations or just general mentorship groups or industry groups, things like that. But sometimes, and for me personally, I can say most of my mentor or folks that I'm now a mentor for just happen organically. And it kind of gets to that moment that you're like, wait, you're my mentor. And like Phil was saying too, people call you that, or I call people that, and they're just as surprised. But really, the learning happens on both ends. Just as I learn just as much from my mentees as they do, I hope, from me. And likewise, those who I'm a mentee of, I learn so much from them, and they tell me every day, like, I learn so much from you as well. So it can happen on both ends. And I think that's where some awareness around what your options are and how to access mentorship, because it can be difficult, especially for different identifying folks. Those organized platforms do exist, but sometimes too, it's like your friend or your boss or a colleague can also be your mentor or become that mentoring relationship for you.
And Natalie, I love that you touched on how much you have learned from your mentees. And this is where we see one of the cross sections of the different ships that we're talking about here is one of the greatest ways to develop leadership skills and acumen. It may not necessarily to be being a manager right away, but it might be as a mentor. It might be taking a role mentoring other people to develop some of the leadership skills. You know, I know, for example, at my organization at Crestron Electronics, we hire a pretty good number of interns many years. In the last several years, we've had between 80 and 113 join this program. And one of the hallmarks of the program is every intern we hire is assigned a mentor, right? Everybody has somebody that they can go to who is there to provide them feedback and guidance. But behind the scenes, part of the reason we choose the mentors we do is because we're looking at who some of those folks are who are right on the precipice of maybe taking the next step in their careers. And we want to develop their leadership skills just as we want to develop those interns and those co-op students. So that way it creates, again, this symbiosis where everyone's learning from each other, everyone is upskilling, and the organization gets better, smarter, more agile as a result. So absolutely true. There's a lead-in question that I want to go to, and Jessica touched on this a moment ago when she was specifically pinpointing the challenge of women finding mentors because of that promotion fall off, right? And there's plenty of statistics out there that show that. There is a study that was done by CoQual that estimates that 71% of executives, so people in positions of leadership, influence, and power, choose a protege that is of the same gender or race. Now, we follow the logic here, and knowing that in the Fortune 500 and in many organizations, the higher you get up on the corporate ladder, the more overwhelmingly white male it is, which means executive proteges are probably disproportionately white male. So then the question comes up, and anybody can jump in on this one. Why do you think this mentorship gap exists, and how can allyship play a central role in bridging that gap and eliminating, or at least reducing, that divide?
I have a lot of thoughts. I was going to try and give you guys a second to jump in, but you know, this is one of those situations where I think it's partially on those of us who want to be in leadership to express that and say, hey, I would like to have some experience in being mentored. I would like to be considered as I start to move up the food chain, so to speak, because it also is about opening the door to say, have you considered women before? Are you comfortable having conversations with them? Do you know what their needs are? Do you know that they want to move up? And it's sometimes challenging, right? For those of us who are on the front lines, who are, again, I use the word fight, but we've got to be uncomfortable to have these conversations and say, did you know that I wanted to be in leadership? Or maybe you expected that because I'm a parent that I don't have the bandwidth for it. But there's actually, there are stats around that too that say that a lot of women get to a point where they don't feel like they're capable anymore, because if they're caring for aging parents or children, they're like, do I really want to take on more stuff? And that's a bigger conversation around societal injustices for parents. We could have a whole nother hour and a half for that.
Easily. That's great, Jessica. Terrific content. Thank you so much. Phil, I know you probably have a few things on this as well. You alluded to it a little bit earlier, but as you know, as folks are climbing up the executive ladder and they're taking on proteges who tend to look like them and sound like them, that like me bias comes into play. Why do you think that exists, and how do you think allyship can play a role in overcoming that?
Well, I think the main thing I wanted to connect to allyship is there's a difference between mentorship and sponsorship. You know, mentorship means like, you know, giving advice and you know, not do as I do, but kind of like that. And then sponsorship is like speaking your name in rooms that you're not in. And I've, you know, realized, you know, I've had tremendous value from sponsorship of people that have spoken my names in rooms that I'm not in, that don't look like me. And that's tremendously important. And you know, I find a lot of value in that, and thus doing the same. If I were ever in a position of leadership to speak in other people's names that don't have that voice as well. But I think it's kind of hard though, because I'm, you know, trying to be empathetic to those. It's like, it might be hard for that person that's speaking on behalf of someone else, you know, in a room that they're not in, because they might be going against the grain of the group. So let's say, you know, a white male is a mentor to someone or a sponsor to someone, and they're going to advocate for someone else, but they're going to be like, what do you know about the plight, this other identity? you know, who are you to be their spokesman, right? And or spokeswoman or person, whatever. And so that person, I could see that on the opposite end of being, that is even scary on their end. You know, scary for that person to ask for help, but it's also probably scary for someone to go against their peers and say, hey, this is not right, or hey, we got an issue here, or hey, all that. So, you know, I really learned over time, you know, just be empathetic, try to put yourself in other people's situations, even those that have, I guess, quote unquote, positions of power, understanding that, you know, maybe it's a scared thing. You know, they're scared to lose that power. They're scared to lose that position or prestige, that they don't have lived experiences. So it's a learning experience for them. And so I try to just extend grace in all different spaces and extend grace to all different identities, and just really had those conversations. I really love what Jessica said about, you know, going about it, even hard conversations with a calm mind, rather than going in with hard conversations, you know, guns a-blazing and very furious, because most people don't hear that noise. When they see anger, they already shut down. But when they hear it from a calm voice or a more stoic voice, you know, you kind of break down some walls and connect. So I don't know, that was just a ramble about speaking in other people in other rooms. But I always, you know, I try to do that for others, and I hope others do that for me as well.
And that point that you echo, Phil, that Jessica had made earlier about, you know, it's not always a fight, it's not always a battle. And at the risk of getting really deep philosophical here, it reminds me of one of my favorite old stories, and that is the sun and the winds were in a conflict one day, and they were trying to decide which of the two of them was strongest. The sun said, well, I'm the strongest because I radiate heat. And the wind said, well, I'm the strongest because I can cause things to move around. And they challenged each other, and they said, well, there's a man in a raincoat right there. First person to get him to take off his raincoat is the strongest. So the wind blew harder and blew harder and blew harder. And the harder the wind blew, the tighter the man wrapped himself in the raincoat. But the sun shone down warmth and light. And the man willingly took off the raincoat and basked in the glow. So sometimes the best way to emerge victorious in achieving a goal is through warmth and kindness, not necessarily through conflict. So you just reminded me of that story, so I had to jump into that. Jessica, while Phil was talking, your hand went up, so I've got to bring it back over.
I thought of a specific example, and it happened to me 2 days ago, where I had expressed a desire to take on some more mentors in my role. And I am in the 29 minutes that you've heard me, can tell that I'm a feminist, and my male counterpart said to me with sincerity, are you open to mentoring a man? And I realized, oh my gosh, I have caused this perception, right? So unless we had that conversation, for him to be bold enough to ask me that, and me to then realize that I have not been getting my messaging across appropriately, we never would have gotten to this point of, wow, we're in alignment. We want to continue to help people in our firm. And I'm not against that, right? But that's just because we hadn't communicated openly and maybe uncomfortably about it before.
Yeah, terrific. Natalie, anything to add on the topic? Good, nailed it. All right, excellent. That's terrific. So this also brings us to some of the other topics. And Jessica, you gave me a really good segue into one of our other discussion pieces. Is when somebody is in a position to mentor others, right? They're in a leadership role, or they in your case, like you did, they say, I want to mentor other people. That's really a gift to be able to and to have that desire to do it. One of the other challenges for the folks the 27% who said, oh, I'd like a mentor, I'm just not quite sure how to find one. There's also the other side of the equation is, well, I'm getting asked to mentor, and now I have to make a decision on, do I want to? Is this something that I want to do? So I want to launch, it's going to be termed a poll question, but the truth is it's actually not a poll question. I'm going to launch we'll launch a quiz. And anyone who knows me, or if you've been to my LinkedIn, you know I refer to myself as an aspiring game show host. So we're going to do this Family Feud style. And the top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 answers are on the board. And here is our poll question. According to a study by DDI, which of the following is the biggest criterion considered by mentors when deciding whether or not to accept a mentee, right? So for the mentees in the room, you're putting yourself in the shoes of the mentor. And for the mentors in the room, you're thinking to your own experience. What is the biggest thing that mentors are thinking about when deciding whether or not to take on a mentee? We'll give everyone a moment to answer that. Okay, we got some good answers coming in so far with about 42 seconds off the clock. I'm going to give it till about the 1 minute, 10 second mark, give everyone a chance to answer. And in the meantime, I'm going to send Phil's very best. He did have to hop off a few minutes ago. He is doing the dad thing tonight. He's taking his kids over to Boy Scouts. So we wish him well. All right, so a good number of folks have answered. I'm going to end the poll now, and we're going to share these results. Natalie, Jessica, are you able to see the poll results live? Good, excellent. What do you think the number one answer is going to be? You want to take a guess?
Time and subject matter.
Time and subject matter, okay. Pick one. Would Steve Harvey let you get away with that if this were fair?
I think probably subject matter.
Subject matter expertise. Okay, Natalie?
We'll lock in as a Family Feud subject matter.
Okay, all right, cool. Well, according to our poll of distinguished attendees, they agreed and they said subject matter expertise would be the one that they would think would be number one at 45%, followed by time commitment, the relationship to the mentee, and then the position of the mentee. And nobody answered office politics, the age of the mentee, or the gender of the mentee. So you are right there in line with our participants. However, the number one answer, according to the research by DDI, was time commitment. So according to them, 75% of mentors said that time commitment was their biggest hurdle. And then 54% said subject matter expertise. So 1 and 2 were right there. And then next was the relationship to the mentee. And then next was the position of the mentee. So the top 4 answers, according to DDI, were also the top 4 answers on our poll, which is terrific. That means that we're right in line with the study. And then age of the mentee came in at 4%, gender of the mentee 4%, and internal competition 2%, office politics only 8%. So also very low down on the list there. So that's what we learned about that piece of it, and about why a mentor can or cannot take on somebody. And so I'll pose this question for the folks who want to mentor or want to have a mentor but aren't quite sure how to get one. Do we feel that there is a fear or a trepidation for asking somebody to be a mentor because of concern about taking their time, or I don't have a relationship with this person? What do you think would stop somebody, and what advice would you want to give to someone who was nervous about asking a mentor or identifying a mentor and connecting with them?
I can start. Yeah, I think it can definitely be nerve-wracking. I remember going through that myself too. And, if you put yourself out there too and you don't get a response, for example, that's also very common. And I think folks often shut down after that. And it's like, well, see, I'm bothering them, or they're too busy to respond to me or whatnot. But I think the biggest lesson is everybody's busy. And I think, follow-up is really important. As a career educator, we say that to our candidates going out in the world of work, and putting yourself out there, personalizing that message that goes out as well. But being respectful and cognizant of the time commitment, especially as well, I think is really important. So some tips that I would suggest is in your outreach, certainly provide options of availability, for example, or a time block, reasonable time, not like, let's meet for 4 hours tomorrow. Like we're all working professionals or, doing things in life. Being cognizant of agenda items, particularly, we hear that a lot. So topic areas or what you're hoping to talk about during this time doesn't need to be a formal agenda, but just some bullet points on areas so that as a mentors, we can prepare and maximize that time together to really make it as meaningful and fruitful as it can be during that allotted time. That will be what we'll remember as mentors. It won't remember that, oh my God, this was in the middle of all of my meetings today or anything like that. It will be the impact as long as it was really driven by that meaningful intentionality.
Love it. Love it. Outstanding, Natalie. Thank you. Jessica, go ahead.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned earlier when you said that it doesn't have to be formal mentorship, right? It could be, hey, I want to ask you some questions about XYZ. And I say that specifically because if you say, can I pick your brain? Nothing makes someone shut down and go, oh, what is this? If it's just this open-ended, like, I want to ask you anything about everything. No, I want to ask you about your process on this particular thing, or I'd like to know more about the way you handled this situation. Absolutely. That's in line with the agenda, right? Having specific questions. It doesn't have to be a year-long mentorship program. Maybe it's 15 minutes and you've gotten more value out of that than you have out of every other relationship in the office that year. But having some meaningful meats behind your ask.
Yeah, and I think that those are some myths that we have to dispel for some folks. Can you have more than one mentor at a time? Yes, absolutely. Can people mentor you on different topics? Yes. You don't have to have a life mentor. You can have somebody who mentors you on a particular project, somebody else maybe on a career path you're following, and somebody else maybe on how you're trying to balance your work life and your personal life. You can have multiple mentors. Just like I tell students all the time, you can have multiple resumes. Sometimes it's about tailoring it to the situation you're in and what you're trying to accomplish. Mentors work in a very similar way. Can mentors be short-term? Yes. Mentors, you nailed it. You said 15 minutes. Sure, you can have a mentor for one conversation. You can have a mentor for your entire life and everything in between. It really is incredible. I want to connect two of our ships here, and I want to connect mentorship with leadership, right? Being a mentor is hard. It is not something that is automatic. Like leaders, mentors are not born. Anybody can be a mentor, but there are challenges to it, and not everybody has the desire to do it. So the question I want to ask is, were your mentors also strong leaders? And were there characteristics that your best mentors and your best leaders had in common? Are there characteristics of great mentors and great leaders, things that those groups have in common?
I paused for a long time because I was thinking that I've had great mentors that have been leaders, but I've also had great value and mentorship from people who I would consider peers because they have different perspectives in the same position that I'm in. So with leaders, that is where you might find that they have less time, but they're leading by example. So maybe their mentorship is me just observing them more. Whereas I can have more in-depth discussions with someone who is a peer to me, and I would still call that mentorship because I'm getting value out of it. Maybe they've been doing this longer, or they do it in a different way. So I think there's value in both directions.
And I'm so happy you brought that up, Jessica, because it gives me selfishly an opportunity to shout out one of our attendees, because what you just described, there is somebody in the audience that I have had that exact relationship with since my days in college, right? So there's a gentleman in the attendees group. His name is Orlando. He was my best friend in college. I was the best man at his wedding. I mean, we're very, very close. One of the smartest guys I've ever met. But he and I were peers, and we mentored each other, and advocated for each other through a variety of challenging situations. So I also think that you help dispel one of the other myths, is that a mentor does not have to be somebody who is in a quote unquote loftier position than you are. They can be someone who's a peer. And the other piece is that reverse mentorship programs are becoming more and more popular, where leaders are asking up and coming individuals who have less experience to mentor them and provide them with new perspective. And that's fascinating to me. So it's a great, great point. Natalie, go for it.
Yeah, I was just going to piggyback off of that because I similarly paused to kind of reflect, like, who's in those categories, and they're all in different categories. And, I might go to one for one thing versus another for another thing too. And I think that subject matter piece is also a different area. I go to one for how do I advance my career versus, how do I navigate this particular issue or problem. But the reverse mentorship thing that you mentioned too reminds me of what I mentioned earlier around how much I learned from mentees as well. And so, maybe it's not named like I am your mentor and you are also my mentor, and we don't talk about it in that way, but there is a lot of learning that happens in that way too, not just education wise, but about myself as a person and individual and professional, that happens from being a mentor, and likewise getting that mentorship from my mentee.
Love it. Outstanding. When I was thinking about the characteristics question myself, the first word that came to my mind, somebody brought up earlier, I think it might have been Phil, was talking about empathy. And that is the power word right now in human resources, human relations, in how big emotional intelligence and how much we've learned about EQ. But when I think about the best leaders I've ever had, and when I think about the best mentors I've ever had, without a doubt, the thing that they all had in common was they were empathetic. Not just to me, but to everybody around them. They almost exuded empathy. They genuinely cared about what it was they were doing and who they were doing it for. I recently gotten very much into the topic of servant leadership, right? And this idea that some of the best leaders are the ones that they focus on how they serve their teams, not the other way around. There's some great literature out there by a gentleman named Ken Blanchard. I'm a big fan of his work. So I always feel it comes down to empathy in so many ways. So really great topics here. I want to just pause a moment, just remind the attendees who are with us that you can put questions in the Q&A if you'd like. We did get a number of questions from our participants ahead of time when they registered, which I really appreciate. And with one of the questions that was submitted ahead of time, I want to continue on the leadership track now and ask, this individual asked, how do you define effective leadership in today's workplace? And I think we have a really good segue from our last question to this one. So I'll put it out to our panelists. How do you define effective leadership in the modern contemporary workplace?
I can get started. Yeah. And I know that we'll talk about some of the challenges as well too, but I think my response comes hand in hand with some of that too. I think when I think about effective leadership, I think about being able to pave the way, as we've talked about, sort of that notion of come with me, not follow me. And that, again, the intersectionality of mentorship and leadership, but also navigating what I call the gray. And this might be particularly specific to higher education, for example, but office culture, as we discussed a little bit as well. Being able to manage up and support within or your mentees or employees, your team, that is really an important aspect, I think, of leadership, being able to advocate, have that empathy, and some level of transparency to protect those and keep your team, keep morale afloat. All of that, I think, is really important. And it's hard, as you mentioned, it's hard to have that balancing act because you may be a leader, but you have a leader and you're leading others. And there's all these, balancing act in place. But I think navigating that is an art, not a science. So,
oh, yeah. I'm glad you brought up the art, not a science piece. Now, I think you nailed it there as well. It's so true. It's also interesting. I just finished my second go around with the Leadership Challenge, which is a bestseller by Jim Kouzes and Barry Posner, and a phenomenal read for anybody who is a leadership nerd like I am. And they talk quite a bit about that piece as well. And I think that there's topics there that could be explored. So it's really, as a matter of fact, one of the things that makes the book so good is that they interview dozens of leaders and they ask, what is your best leadership story? And what's interesting is that everyone's best leadership story came out of a situation of crisis or challenge. It was not, well, everything was going great. Everything was perfect. Profits were up 30%. Retention was outstanding. Everybody was happy. So I just went in and I led my team and everyone was happy. And that was my best leadership story. No, it was this was on fire and this was going crazy. And we had to make this happen in a very short time. And this is what I did and how I led my team. And that is a big separator, is leading through crisis and leading through challenges is not always easy. So, Jessica, I'd love to toss it over to you and see some of your thoughts on effective leadership, and also what are the challenges of leadership today?
Yeah, I think one of the best qualities a leader can have now is being nimble, because the rate of change within the workplace has increased so much in the last 3 years alone, 3 to 4 years. And now we're starting to see there's a lot more transparency around initiatives with diversity and inclusion, right? For a long time, it was very popular to say, we want to have a diverse workforce. We want to be an inclusive workforce. Well, what does that mean for the bathrooms in your building? What does that mean for the holidays that your employees have off, right? All of these sorts of, what does this mean in terms of flexibility for who has to be in the office and when and for what? And so now we're seeing that. This is why I think it's so challenging for leaders right now, is that now they really have to somewhat reevaluate what they may have been doing for a very long time, because we are in a very different place than we were pre-pandemic, because now people have been able to express themselves more because they were at home. How do you now invite that in a welcoming way in the office and stay true to your values and say, I'm a leader who wants that?
Yeah, and an interesting topic about that, Jessica, because that also opens up such a great litany of topics from an inclusion and an accessibility standpoint. It is, who is making decisions, where are decisions being made, when are decisions being made, and are they being made in a place and a time when anybody has the opportunity to be part of that process. And what I've heard through a variety of webinars and some of the articles I've read is that three of the scourges of inclusive decision-making and leadership, right? And the first one kind of hurts me because it's something I enjoy doing, but it's how many decisions are made on the golf course, which is historically used as sort of an exclusionary place and time where these decisions are made, and they can be very, very insular, with folks who have been making those decisions on that in that area for a long time. Then there was, I was on a webinar recently that talked about the decision making on the smoke break, and how if you had decision makers who tended to be from the same group who would go out and talk over a smoke break, and the non-smokers would be inside. It reminded me of the episode of Friends when Rachel decides to take up smoking to start spending more time with her boss outside, and she absolutely hates it, but she thinks it's the only way she can be part of the decision-making process. And then the idea of happy hours and after hours events, and how that can exclude people who are caregivers to their family members, people who they avoid alcohol for personal reasons, religious reasons, health reasons, that can put up barriers to participation in a decision-making process. And we think of things like happy hours and smoke breaks and golf rounds as being fairly innocuous, but we have to be intentional about understanding who that affects. Go ahead, Jessica, you have some response to that.
Yeah, there's also a large and growing population of people who are neurodivergent or finding out that they're neurodivergent later in life. And they might be better performers at their job when they are at home.
Yes.
So now they are being excluded from leadership because they can't be physically present because it is not a good work environment for them. And that's a whole layer and a demographic of people that I don't know that we had even been considering. And now there's those of us that are women between 35 and 40, I think a huge percentage have been diagnosed with ADHD. What does that mean for my ability to be in leadership, right? Like there's so many layers to this.
Yep, and introversion and extroversion are topics as well. No doubt. And I want to shout somebody else out who's in our attendee group right now. His name is Joseph Way. He's a very good friend. He's a legend in the AV industry, now over at, I believe, at UCLA. And in the AV industry, one of the hot topics right now that I love is that audiovisual technology, whether it's in classrooms or companies, are more and more designed to reduce those barriers and to create opportunities for folks, whether they're remote and they're hybrid, maybe they're at home because of neurodivergence, a different ability, they're caretakers, we're trying to overcome proximity bias. The idea that in order to be viewed as important by your boss and be part of a decision maker, you have to be there, you have to be close, you have to be nearby. And how technology now and this AV connectivity, and a lot of this is technology that my company, Crestron Electronics, builds and provides to schools, to businesses. How can we reduce those barriers and give everyone an equal seat at the table, even if they're not physically at the table? And that's, I think, part and parcel of building a bigger table. So excellent topic. There was another question that came during the registration period that I really loved, and that was, how does a mentor differ from a career coach? And I wanted to see if anybody had any thoughts on that, because if somebody's saying, well, should I get a mentor or should I get a career coach, but I don't understand what the difference is, what advice might we give somebody who's trying to navigate those relationships? Go ahead, Natalie.
As a career educator, I can say this reminds me of what Jessica and I were kind of chatting about a little bit ago around the different types of mentoring relationships, that some may be peers and some may be those in leadership. I think a career coach can be your mentor, but it doesn't mean that that is your only option for a mentoring relationship. I think career coaches are educated and trained on providing guidance, insights, topical areas for preparation around how to conduct a search or how to connect and network with folks, etc. But mentoring, again, you might want to find subject matter experts in. So your career coach might not be the engineer or the data scientist. And so for that particular, if you want to know what a day in the life is like, your career coach may provide you with opportunities to connect with a data scientist, but then that data scientist for subject matter purposes may become a mentor for you as well. So I think those are some of the outstanding large differences in those. They can be intersection, but they don't always have to be.
Real quick, I have to correct my mistake from a moment ago by my friend Joe in the attendees group. It's Josiah Way, not Joseph. That was my mistake. I just went Joe, and it just kind of clicked in my head. So he let me know, no, it's Josiah Way. So either way, he's a legend. So and he's here with us tonight. So, Jessica, any thoughts on that you want to add?
Yeah, I think it's very nuanced. I think a coach is someone who's probably more driven in helping you meet certain goals, right? And there might be some data in terms of what are we tracking when you're working on whatever goal that is. Whereas mentorship can be just open communication. It can be, I just need some therapy around this. It can, a little less structured, I would say.
Yep, absolutely. Another really interesting question that had come in, we had a later registration today. So I just got this question about 5:55 tonight, and I thought it was really interesting. Is what are the best ways to avoid groupthink where bad decisions are made because people are afraid to disrupt conformity. And I think it really applies here because from a leadership point of view, being able to be a leader in a way that tries to break down groupthink, but I also think that having the most diverse and representative room possible, when we talk about allyship, can help break that down. I mean, I think that's one of the first steps is to surround yourself not with not with carbon copies, but with people with diversity of perspective and diversity of thought. I'm keen to hear Natalie and Jessica, what you think about how to break down groupthink and how do you avoid that in today's workplace?
I have conversations with a lot of groups at companies that are, the group of women or the group of queer employees, right? And they have the conversations around, these are things that we'd like to see done differently. But a lot of times they don't feel comfortable sharing that because they don't feel like there's an open invitation. So I think the onus is on leaders to say, I want to not just say, but practice having an open door to, we're thinking about some changes. Why don't we invite our different affinity group leaders to the table to be a part of this conversation? We want to invite you to share a different perspective, but unless it's openly said, nobody wants to stir the pot, right? So that's on the leaders to say, I'm giving you this safe space. And then the important part is once you've asked for it, you've got to hear it. And not just say, well, I listened to you. Great. What are you doing about it? Because if you don't listen to me the first time, we're not telling you again because you've broken my trust.
Oh, so the trust topic coming up, right? That I think we take that back a little bit also to the characteristics of effective mentors and effective leaders. Integrity, trustworthiness, that has to be on that short list for sure. So, Natalie, what are your thoughts on the groupthink topic?
Yeah, definitely agreed with what Jessica mentioned. I think the key component is that when you're asking for feedback, to really take it in, to take it into consideration, not just hearing it, but how are you implementing it, and then building a follow-up meeting or a plan or a email or action items from there on how that is being implemented and what that's like. I think we're in a little bit of a better place, I think, of kind of disrupting that and breaking that down by having strong advocates in leadership little by little. But being comfortable with, again, navigating the gray and being able to ask the questions and sort of challenge with intention, I think helps break that down a little bit more, but then always seeking to understand the diversity of thought, like you mentioned as well.
Awesome. Outstanding. All right. So we're getting right to our 7 o'clock point, our 7 o'clock time frame. So I do want to just remind everyone that if you have any last questions that you want to pop into the Q&A, please do. And then we'll also stay on in case anybody has questions for us afterwards when we stop the recording and pop things into YouTube. But this has been so exciting. This has been a lot of fun, just being able to have this conversation, and again, in an informal way, touching on topics that I think are so important to us. So I think I want to end it with this from my perspective. And again, if we have questions coming on Q&A, I'll ask them. But somebody who is either seeking a mentor, or they are a mentor and they're trying to work through being a mentor, or they're being mentored by another person, what is the best piece of advice that you could give to somebody in a mentoring relationship, either as the mentor or the mentee? What would you tell them if they said, what is the piece of advice that I absolutely need to have going into this relationship? And I did not send them that question ahead of time. So this is off the cuff based on the conversation.
Well, you used the word intentional before, so that's top of mind for me right now. I think having a goal in mind, if you're going to seek, even just a conversation with someone, what are you trying to get out of this conversation or relationship? Is it a specific topic? Is it a specific learn? Is it an introduction, whatever that is? And not being afraid of the no. You won't get a no very often. Just ask.
Yep. Good one. Yeah, not being afraid of the no. I love that, because I think that one of the reasons folks are afraid of the no is they think if somebody says no, it's a personal reflection on them. And I think going back to the poll, it could just be, no, I just really don't have the bandwidth right now, and I don't want to I don't want to do a disservice to you is probably one of the biggest reasons why somebody might say no, or I don't think I'm in the best position, but I can introduce you to somebody else who is.
Yes, that right there.
That might happen.
Exactly.
Go ahead, Natalie.
Yeah, I was just going to add, I think the intentionality piece is huge. And I think the other aspect for me is sort of getting out of your comfort zone a little bit and not being afraid to reach out or know again who you might reach out to provide you an introduction. But then from there, I think accepting that relationships are going to look different. So you may talk to one mentor every day or once a week or once a month. And then I have mentors that I maybe talk to when I'm job searching, and that may be every couple of years or so. And so I think there's some fear or anticipation around how do I respark a mentoring relationship as well. And I think that could be a topic in itself as well. But I think that's why keeping the connection alive is important, and just sort of touch points along the way. Maybe you're reaching out to say happy birthday or how are you doing, checking in, rather than, I need to talk or I need something right now too. And I think that really helps keep it organic and keep it, always being intentional as well.
Yep. Awesome. I love that intentionality is such a recurring topic throughout all three of these, right? Allyship, leadership, and mentorship. And my friend Joe also put into the Q&A, well, let's look at the flip side of this particular topic. He says, I get asked a lot to be a mentor. Obviously, he really wants to help everyone. And I know him, he does. What are the things to consider when accepting a mentee? What are the things that mentors should be aware of when deciding whether or not to take a mentee under their wing? That's a really interesting topic for folks who are mentoring others. Any initial thoughts on that?
I think managing expectations and having a conversation around what are you looking to get out of this? How much time can I commit to you? Are you looking for us to meet regularly, or do you just have some one-off questions? So that way there isn't disappointment on either end, because then maybe the result of it might mean, I was going to say no, but you really only need some things that I know I can help you with in little bits. Maybe I can talk to you while I'm driving to go get my kids, right? Like that, it opens up the conversation to sort of flex.
Like that. Yep. That makes a lot of sense. Being clear on the expectations. Great. Natalie?
I think that, and similarly, but kind of piggybacking off of that, the transparency around if it's not a good fit for you, if it's around subject matter or time or whatever that may be, then maybe seeking to understand a little bit more. How well do you know the person asking, and how might you use your own network to really provide them with an opportunity to meet someone or connect with someone else?
Yeah. Absolutely. And one of the reasons I just put in the chat, I put a link to, this is part 2 of a mentorship webinar that we've done. And in part 1, we spent a lot of time on what a mentor is not, right? Because we talk a lot about what a mentor is, but what a mentor is not. And I think that part of this is also understanding what Jessica said. What is the intention? What is the goal? Is this person asking me to be a mentor to them because they're looking for something that's purely transactional? If this person is my mentor, they will get me a job, and then that will be that. Or are you looking for a relationship where there's going to be some learning and some exchange of information? I think it's important to also be aware of that and to recognize that when you're deciding whether or not you want to have a mentee. Are they looking for a mentor-mentee relationship, or are they really just looking for you to kick open a door for them, and then that's that, and then you'll never hear from them again? That's something to consider as well. Shannon, another good friend who was an intern with Crestron a couple years ago. I'm very fond of Shannon. And she asks, can a mentor be someone outside of your current job, career, or even company? And then the second part of the question is, how often should you reach out to the mentor while also respecting their time? I feel like the first half of that question, it's easy with an asterisk. I think the answer is yes, right? We talked about, can a mentor be short-term and long-term? Yes. Can you have more than one? Yes. Can they be somebody outside your job, career, company? Yeah, absolutely, right? I don't think anybody has any dissent to that, right? Right, we're all good with that. But how often should you reach out to the mentor while also respecting their time? That's really provocative. So I want to open that one up as well. Oh, both of
that goes
unmuted at the same time. We just had a tie.
I'm going to say the same thing. I think it goes back to managing
expectations. Because if you don't have that conversation early on and you just open the door and say, sure, whenever you need me, then it might be whenever they need you. And you've got to, depending on what your relationship to that person is, find an appropriate structure. Not always necessary, but you might need to have a structure.
And let's take it back to that conversation from earlier about what are the characteristics of leaders and mentors that tend to share some commonality. I think open communication, the ability to communicate openly, be very honest, be very authentic and transparent is going to be part of that. And that if you are entering into a mentoring relationship, if you're concerned about respecting their time, then you should be able, and they should be receptive to a conversation of, what do you think is appropriate for our contact? How often should I reach out to you? And Jessica, to your point, is this going to be something where it's a monthly touch point and it's very structured, or is it more of a, listen, we're going to have calls when necessary, but text me if something is really bogging you down? And these mentor relationships come in all shapes and sizes. Allyship comes in all shapes and sizes. Leadership comes in all shapes and sizes. And I think that's, and I'm trying to remember who it was who used this one word answer earlier, and I absolutely loved it. And I think it applies to all three, and that's being nimble, right? That's agility, is the fact that it is, and Natalie, you said this also earlier, it's more art than science. Yes, there's a science of leadership, but if you're doing it artistically, not scientifically. You don't do this in check boxes. So I want to thank Natalie and Jessica and Phil, who had to drop off early for some family obligations, for a 65 minutes that felt like 6.5 minutes, just because of how much fun it was and how fast it went by. And I hope everybody who's watching feels the same way. I hope everyone who's watching this on YouTube feels the same way. If you are checking this out on YouTube, watching the replay, please add some comments or questions down below as well. And let's keep this conversation going. Everyone's going to receive a survey if you attended live, but if you have topics that you'd like to see in the future and would like us to cover in some of these other fireside chats, share those with us. Let us know in the comments. Feel free to connect with any of our panelists. They put their links into the chat, and just go out there and be what you can be to who you can be. Be that person. I think that's my big takeaway here from Natalie from earlier, is be that person. And be the change you want to see in the world, whether it's as a mentor, as a leader, or as an ally. And I hope to continue to do that. But I can't thank you all enough for being a part of this and spending an hour on a Thursday evening. It's been a lot of fun.
Thanks so much.
Can we end with a Go Pack Go? Is that okay? Can we say a little Go Packers for me tonight? Can we give me some love, please? All right. Okay. Everyone else is leaving because I said. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for listening to Positive Philter, a podcast that focuses on family, friends, career, with a little self-help along the way. If you enjoyed this podcast, please share it with your family and friends, and like the Facebook page, Spreading Positivity of Movement. Thanks for listening.